to family members or elsewhere around the country, and there are many that you are sending that you don't even know their destination. Please expand on that and tell us what that looks like.
Sure. So we've, when a patient comes into the hospital, we have to provide them with a safe discharge per CMS, and we do that. So a lot of that includes tracking down their family members. We've had to fly them to their families. We've had to air ambulance individuals for higher levels of care, and we've just had to durable medical equipment, wheelchairs, walkers, all these other items that we have to provide for patients for a safe discharge.
And you're not being compensated by the federal government or anyone else, and these individuals are not those that have been brought for medical treatment by CBP through some kind of legal mechanism.
Correct. Some individuals may have walked in, declared themselves a migrant, and we treat those. They could have come in by taxi. They could have come in by any means. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. I'll yield back.
Thanks for all your good work. Chairman of the Subcommittee on Immigration, the gentleman from California, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Trenchell, you said that your hospital has incurred $26 million in uncompensated care over the past year. Obviously, that money doesn't come from nowhere. It comes out of what you'd otherwise be spending. So does this mean that there's $26 million less equipment for your patients, $26 million less staff to care for them?
It does. That extra revenue that we would have brought in would have gone back into the community, and we do that as a nonprofit. So it would have been either to purchase equipment, have additional access ports for patients here, bring in additional physicians. It would have been used for the benefit of our community, for sure.
Now, you say you serve all patients equally, but it is a zero-sum equation, isn't it? A bed that's taken by one person is not going to be available for another. An hour of a doctor's time on one person is not going to be available to care for another. So if your emergency room, for example, is packed with illegal immigrants, doesn't that mean, just as a simple mathematical equation, that legal residents must wait exactly that much longer for care?
Yes, it does. That's very true. We've had that experience in our emergency room. We've had that experience with patients who've had to delay elective surgery because other urgent migrant patients have come in who needed emergent surgery. We've had to delay maternity patients with planned inductions because we've simply been out of space in our maternity unit with migrant patients who've had deliveries, many of them just coming in at the same time for deliveries.
Now, of course, virtually all of these migrants don't stay here. Where do they go?
We don't know where they go. Some may go to Florida. They really go everywhere. We don't know.
So this is going to be impacting every hospital in the country?
Yes.
Sheriff Wilmot, are Mexican cartels operating in Yuma County today?
There is a cartel. There is a cartel influence in Yuma County. We have two states in Mexico that border Yuma County. We have the Baja California, which is the Sinaloa cartel in Sonora.
So what are they doing on this side of the border? What are the cartels doing on this side of the border?
Well, they're the ones that are orchestrating the smuggling of narcotics and humans towards the east part of the county.
What are your greatest concerns for public safety from their activity here?
Well, obviously, first concern is the loss of life and the impact on our local communities. It's also the fact that when we have that many getaways, and we know how many countries have actually come through Yuma County, those also being special interest countries, what is this country going to expect to happen of these unknown individuals coming into the United States? Where are they going, and what is their intentions?
Could we expect to see the kind of violent cartel gun battles in our cities that we're now seeing in Mexico?
We have seen victims of that come into our county as well as other counties along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Is it just a matter of time before we see the same things here?
I believe they've already seen it in other states. As
we
of
saw
late.
it in Tulare County in California
Yes.
just a few weeks ago. What's your warning to other communities from what you've experienced here?
We've been trying to warn other communities for the past couple years in regards to the activities that we're seeing here. It's not staying in the border, it's going across the nation, and I don't think you'll find a sheriff now throughout the United States that doesn't say that they're actually now a border county because of what the impacts they've had in their communities.
I thank the gentleman. Now yield to the gentleman from Florida, my friend, Mr. Gates.
Mr. Chairman, I observe that the people of Yuma are good folks, and they deserve a lot better from the federal government than they have been getting. And whether or not they'll get it depends heavily on the House of Representatives, and particularly this group, and whether or not we will fight for them. We don't have a single Democrat that we could even convince to come to this briefing to get evidence from these experts. You think we're going to get President Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer to pass legislation without a fight, without demanding that it go in must-pass bills, and we have to use every bit of leverage, or this is a deeply unserious exercise. Now, Dr. Trenchel, about 1 in 4 of the migrants who use birthing services at your hospital need neonatal intensive care unit services, NICU, right?
That is true, yes.
And that rate, 1 in 4, is way higher than with the non-migrant population, right?
Very much higher.
And you got about 20 beds at any given time.
Correct.
And they fill up sometimes, don't they?
Yes,
and
they
so
do.
when you have those beds that are full up because of the pressure of these migrant communities, where do you have to send the residents of Yuma when they have a baby that needs NICU?
We would have to fly them to Phoenix or another venue.
And that's 170 miles away.
Yes, it is.
There are few prayers that I have ever seen more sincere and deeper than the prayers of parents when their little babies are at the NICU. And for all the folks on the left who want to lecture to us about how humane an open border is, there is nothing humane about putting a parent on a 170-mile journey when they need NICU services. Supervisor Lyons, we hear Secretary Mayorkas come to us all the time on the Judiciary Committee and testify that the most important partnerships above all else for the Department of Homeland Security are the partnerships with local officials. We hear it time and again. And so here is my simple question for you. Has Secretary Mayorkas ever lied to you?
Yes.
And what was the substance of that lie?
So the mayor and I had the opportunity to visit with Secretary Mayorkas and the Yuma Sector Chief, as well as the Chief of the entire Border Patrol at Sector Headquarters almost a year ago. And during that meeting, he committed to, after reviewing the border, both from the ground and the air, to specifically address, quote unquote, 9 of the 11 Yuma gaps.
And how many of those gaps have been addressed?
To date so far, none. We see infrastructure on 2, and yet they will not deter anyone.
Yeah. This is my 4th time here with you. I think
Yes,
if I
sir.
come any more often, I'm going to be eligible to vote in Yuma County.
Thank you for coming back, Matt.
But in these
District 2 is
circumstances,
great.
it seems as though it's not a great mystery where the pressure points are, where we have gaps in the wall, and where we have recalcitrant tribes. And so in those circumstances, should we observe that this is a lack of capability or a lack of will to go and plug those holes?
A lack of will. We've followed up multiple times, as well as Yuma Sector Border Patrol staff and with undersecretaries, and we were told time and time again that they were issuing contracts, that we would have it no later than June of last year, then no later than September, then no later than November. Every time it kept getting pushed out.
So would a reasonable person observe that this is on purpose?
My wife says I'm not a very patient person, but I was patient every time that I called, and they continued to push this process out. It's not reasonable.
Well, the American people are losing their patience. We ought to be losing ours. And while we greatly appreciate the 3 of you being here to answer our questions, the day will come soon when Secretary Mayorkas has to come and answer our questions. And to my colleagues, if he'll lie to Mr. Lyons and lie to the community here, then he will lie to us and he will lie to the American people. And that's why I'm very proud to co-sponsor Representative Biggs' articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas, because this is not a lack of ability, it is a lack of will. Mr. Lyons, I'll give you the last word.
Mr. Gates, thank you very much. And to what Mr. McClintock was saying, as far as the cartel violence, over the last 14 months, the sheriff and I have been made aware of over 200 assassinations in San Luis Rio, Colorado, where the cartels are targeting law enforcement. This last weekend, we had another officer shot, and then retribution the following night. So when you talk about that violence, it's here at our border. They are in control, and we want to take our control, our border control back. And we need an administration that has the will to secure our borders, and that's what we're asking you to do. And I thank you very much for being here.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Florida. Now I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you very much. Let me follow up on that. Sheriff, do you believe the United States government has control of the border here with Mexico?
I believe that we are trying, and our Border Patrol partners are trying very hard. But the cartels are the ones that are creating the narrative and controlling the activities all along the 2,000 miles of international boundary.
Do you have the ability to identify migrants who are inadmissible to the United States for criminal reasons or prior deportations?
We do not have access to that.
Is ICE or CBP actively assisting you in processing the migrants in your charge?
In the law enforcement aspect, we work with them quite a bit in regards to those that are in my jail. As far as the immigration side, that is something that is not in our wheelhouse. I can tell you that because of their constraints, that I've actually cross-deputized our federal partners in the different entities to be able to seek state charges against individuals that the U.S. Attorney would not charge for crimes.
Have you had, say that last part again.
The
United
part in
States
regards to
Attorney.
the United States Attorney not wanting to charge an individual for a crime, then I've cross-deputized them so they could take that case to our county attorney to get prosecution.
Have you had any detainers issued by ICE for migrants in your facilities?
Yes, I have.
That's something we need.
As a result of the illegal migration coming across our border, are they harming the environment?
Absolutely. The vast amount of trash, pharmaceuticals, garbage, clothing that's being dumped along our river corridor has been astronomical, and the impacts for our farmers in their fields as well.
When we had a hearing just a couple weeks ago, we had a Judge Samaniego from, I believe, El Paso, and Sheriff Daniels on the panel, and they had very divergent statements to say in regards to fentanyl, that the reason for fentanyl, the expansion of its use in our country and the devastating consequences, was not because of the border being open. That was the case being made by Judge Samaniego. Sheriff Daniels said that it is a result of the borders being opened over the last couple of years that fentanyl use and its migration into the United States has gone up exponentially. Who's correct?
I would tend to support Sheriff Daniels' statement in regards to that. And I would agree with his statement as well.
So you've seen, are you saying you've seen the same thing as Sheriff Daniels in Cochise County?
We have seen the same type of activity where individuals were recruited to come and pick up individuals that had entered this country illegally between a port of entry and come to pick them up because it's a money-making adventure. And they've also been found to be in possession of narcotics, too, at the same time.
Has Secretary Mayorkas secured the border?
No.
I just have one further question and a final statement, Mr. Chairman. To Dr. Trenchel, do any of the NGOs out there, non-governmental organizations, have they compensated you for any of the uncompensated care that you're providing for migrants?
No, they have not. We've not received any compensation from anyone.
Thank you. I'm just going to close with this. You know, folks, set aside, we've had the most number of people that are on the terror watch come across our border in the last couple of years in the history of the United States of America. You can set aside the human trafficking. You have the largest, your United States government via the Biden administration is running perhaps the largest human trafficking, or complicit in perhaps the greatest, biggest human trafficking operation in the history of the world, along with the cartels, along with the International Organization of Migration, a United Nations outfit, and others. Set those things aside Just fentanyl alone should be a national emergency in America, and I can't believe we do not have colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are not here today, and even if they're not here today, that are not calling for the same thing that we're calling for. At a minimum, secure the border to stop the fentanyl, or at least reduce the amount of fentanyl coming into America that has made every state, including my state of Wisconsin, a border state. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentleman. Well done. I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That does it. I sit up here and I wonder what you must be thinking who are here kind enough to spend your time watching us today. And you must be troubled that only one of the major parties is here. You must be discouraged as you ponder what it would take for the federal government to fix this problem. I appreciate your hospitality and your interest, and I love everything I've seen about Yuma. How many fentanyl deaths in Yuma this year, Supervisor Lyons, in the past year?
Mr. Bishop, I was just able to submit data that I acquired from the hospital. That number continues to increase. You know, the average nationwide is 1 in 100,000, and yet we've had 16 fatalities directly attributable to fentanyl, so more than 16 times the national average.
How many ODs?
16. Well, there were 117 overdoses,
Yeah.
and 16 of those were
16
fatals.
deaths, right? So you're way above the national average in that key thing. You know, you made a point earlier that this is very interesting because a lot of our colleagues in Washington say over and over and over again that the uncontrolled immigration between ports of entry really doesn't contribute to the illicit drugs because they come through the ports of entry. You've touched on that already, and you've said your data that Border Patrol's furnished to you is that about half, I hope everybody's listening in Washington, about half of the seizures are occurring between ports of entry.
Yes, sir.
Means it is coming from this uncontrolled problem. And yet, you know, we have colleagues that Katie Porter said at a hearing. She's a Democrat from California. She said last week at a hearing, we had a change in president in 2020 and some changes in border policy. And what we can see here is that the facts show we are seizing a lot more fentanyl. And for me, as a mom, that is a sign of success. I don't even know what to say about that. Border Chief Raul Ortiz said a couple of weeks ago, put a tweet out that said that Yuma, so far in fiscal year 23, we have seized over 476 pounds of fentanyl between ports of entry along our southwest border. That's enough to kill 100 million people. I'd say that's a problem even that Washington should be able to recognize. I want to use my remaining time, Supervisor Lyons, I hope you won't be offended. I was taken with a moment of conversation between you and me at the lunch before we came in here. I hope you won't mind my sharing it with the committee and with those attending, because for me it connects to the issue that we're grappling with. You and your wife have 11 children, and with 3 remaining at home, your wife has undertaken developing subdivisions.
Yes, she has.
You have 4 grandchildren. Your children are hardworking and productive. And yet you've made time not only to serve in office, but as a charitable leader, particularly as a chairman of the food bank, not only reckoned with the awesome task of figuring out how to provide for 11 children, but you've produced and served in a way to demonstrate just how constructive and productive human lives can be. And as extraordinary as your story is, I would say that, and I don't articulate it to single you out, but to recognize that the law enforcement officers who are sitting next to and behind you, and the healthcare professionals like Dr. Trenchell, and the men and women attending this, there are hundreds of lives who likewise have fulfilled and even exceeded their potential to contribute to building and sustaining a culture that has proved the most successful in the history of mankind for the flourishing of human beings. And everyone wants his family, his or her family and children to thrive. And I submit that what we're talking about is not really a question of the stresses on the safety net. the provision of food for the people who can't provide it for themselves, the provision of medical care, the jail, the detention services, keeping the community safe. This is about how we maintain and protect a culture that has been the most successful in the world. And that is what is at stake, too. So I'm grateful to you for having us here, for your hospitality in this great community, to show me that yet again, and to remind all of us that we must act. We must act. And the first thing we must do, I'm going to finish this way because I think everybody's got a responsibility to say, what are we going to do? Matt Gaetz summarized it correctly, that it is a question of will. And the first thing to preserve this culture we must do is we must restore order. And the best vehicle at hand, Chip Roy of Texas is not here today, can't be here today, but his H.R. 29, which says to the Secretary of Homeland Security, notwithstanding any other provision of law, with respect to every migrant that you encounter, you must detain or turn away. You cannot just release them into the country. You cannot continue doing this to all of our support services, our safety net on which our culture depends. You cannot do this to our culture, or we will surely face not only what you just, a shocking information you just mentioned, Supervisor Lyons, about the assassinations. I haven't heard that story, I'm afraid to say. But there was this, on January 5 of this year, in I think it's Calacua, Mexico, there was a war between the Sinaloa cartel and the Mexican army, with helicopter gunships firing against people on the ground and burning cars, blocking the entrances to the town so that the people were cowered in their homes. And that will occur in the United States of America if we do not get control of this problem. It sits squarely as a responsibility of the federal government, and we must have the will to act. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.